Some towns hide their secrets well until the shadows decide to speak. Tonight, you'll see what happens when a peaceful facade begins to crack and something unseen stirs beneath the surface. This is more than just a news story. It's the first ripple of something much darker. Subscribe to the Midnight Codex and step into the dark with us. The screen flickers to life, showing an ordinary quiet afternoon in a small town. The camera sweeps over a few familiar streets, neatly paved roads lined with trees, the light of late afternoon gently casting long shadows. Streetlights, still dim, hang like quiet sentinels, awaiting the nightfall. The air is still, a soft breeze ruffling the leaves, as if nothing could disrupt the tranquility of this seemingly perfect small town. In the midst of this calm, the image slowly begins to warp. The screen shudders for a brief second, as if a fault line is cracked across the very fabric of reality. The faint hum of interference seeps in, a subtle disturbance in what should be a peaceful broadcast. The image sharpens, and we see the figure of a reporter standing confidently in front of the camera. His suit is neat, his expression serious, but there's something in his eyes, something that suggests he knows things are not as they seem. "Good evening," the reporter begins, his voice steady but edged with a slight tension. "Welcome to tonight's special broadcast. We've received breaking news regarding a series of disappearances that have baffled authorities. Earlier today, the police released a report about 3 missing persons within a week, all of whom disappeared during the late hours of the night." As he speaks, the screen flickers once more, casting brief waves of static. Despite the interruption, the reporter maintains his composure. His words carry the weight of something more than just a news report. There's a hint of forewarning, as if this story is only the beginning of something far more unsettling. The camera pans away from him, shifting its focus to the eerily empty streets around him. A slow, deliberate zoom, as if the camera itself is trying to examine the town under a microscope. The scene still appears normal, the same quiet town, the same rows of houses, but as the camera lingers on the streetlights, a strange feeling emerges. The lights flicker, subtly at first, then more noticeably, as if the very pulse of the town is faltering. The streets are deserted, save for a few parked cars. The sound of wind rustling through the trees is the only thing that breaks the silence. There's something off about the way the cars are parked, too still, as though waiting for something to happen. The scene is quiet, but it's an unsettling kind of quiet, a stillness that feels like it's holding its breath. The camera zooms in on a particular street lamp that flickers erratically. It's a small, almost insignificant detail, but it draws attention. It seems to pulse. On, off, on, off. An unnatural rhythm that doesn't match the peaceful surroundings. In the background, the soft hum of distant traffic is barely audible, but it sounds strangely distant, as if the world beyond this town is slowly fading away. A car passes by, its headlights cutting through the darkening sky, but the moment it's gone, the light seems to linger in the air for a second longer than it should, like a memory of something moving too fast to catch. The street, which seemed so inviting just a moment ago, now feels like a stage set, beautiful but hollow, a facade that hides something darker just beneath the surface. The camera cuts back to the reporter, still standing in front of the camera, but now there's a shift in his demeanor. His posture is rigid, his eyes scanning the scene behind him as if searching for something unseen. There's a momentary pause, a brief hesitation in his voice, but he quickly resumes, as if trying to ignore the creeping unease that seems to have settled over him. "We're continuing to investigate these cases, but what stands out is a strange pattern," the reporter continues, his voice betraying the slightest crack of concern. "All of the missing persons disappeared between midnight and 3 a.m., with no signs of struggle or forced entry. Neighbors report hearing unusual noises, sounds they can't explain, but no one has seen anything. Until now." The camera zooms in on his face, his expression more intense now, the flickering of the streetlights in the background casting odd shadows across his face. There's a palpable tension in the air, a quiet, building sense of something wrong that the reporter himself cannot quite articulate. But he doesn't stop. He continues, forcing his words out in the same professional tone, even as the scene behind him grows increasingly unsettling. Suddenly, the image shifts again. This time, it's not just static on the screen, but a brief flicker of something darker. The streetlights blink in unison, then fade to black, leaving the streets swallowed by shadow. The unsettling quiet deepens. The camera stays on the reporter a moment longer before pulling back, zooming in on a dark alley where the faintest movement can be seen, a shadow shifting, something crossing just out of view. Then, the reporter's voice cuts through the growing silence. We've received reports of strange figures, shadows seen in backyards during the night. At 3 a.m., several witnesses reported seeing something in the darkness. But it wasn't quite human. The words hit with a strange weight, the calmness of his tone in direct contrast to the rising tension in the air. The camera shifts once again as the streetlights flicker, now more erratically. The wind picks up, blowing papers and debris across the street, their movement too erratic to be natural. The camera lingers on the empty streets, the wind howling through the alleyways, before cutting back to the reporter, who is now standing with an air of urgency. We'll keep you updated on any new developments, but for now, if you have any information, please contact us immediately. But as he finishes speaking, the screen begins to tremble. The image distorts briefly, the lights behind him flickering more violently now, as though something is about to break through the very fabric of reality itself. His eyes dart toward the screen, a fleeting moment of unease passing through them, before the camera cuts out. The screen flickers once more, and then, in an instant, it goes black. The scene transitions smoothly from the unsettling report on the news broadcast to a dimly lit room. The sound of a faint hum grows louder as the camera pans across the room, revealing a man seated in a worn-out chair. His face is shadowed, deliberately obscured by the blur of distortion, but his posture speaks volumes, tense, hunched, as if he's still haunted by whatever he witnessed that night. The room is dim, only the glow of a single desk lamp illuminating his face, casting sharp, uncomfortable shadows that seem to stretch unnaturally. The walls behind him are blurred, giving the room a sense of disorientation. It feels like a safe place, but also an unsettling one, as if his reality is slipping away and there's nowhere left to hide. The man's voice, low and shaky, breaks through the silence. It's a voice filled with a kind of fear that's difficult to disguise. His words are hesitant, uncertain, as though speaking them brings back memories he wishes he could forget. I was standing out in my backyard, he begins, his words heavy with reluctance. I was looking out, and, well, it was around 3 a.m. I thought I saw someone at first, maybe someone walking through the yard, but then I looked closer, and I knew it wasn't a person. The eyes, they were too bright, too unnatural. They seemed to look right through me. The camera zooms in slightly on his face, capturing the subtle tremor of his lips, the faint beads of sweat on his brow. It's clear this man is still trapped in the terror of what he witnessed, and as he speaks, the unease in his voice grows stronger. It was standing still, he continues, his voice faltering, motionless. It wasn't moving at all. It didn't make a sound, just standing there, staring at me. I could feel it, like it was waiting for me to do something, but it wasn't human. I knew that for sure. The screen shifts ever so slightly, the edges becoming more distorted, as though the very act of recounting this memory is starting to bend the fabric of reality itself. A low, almost imperceptible buzzing hum begins to invade the soundscape. It's subtle, but enough to create a sense of discomfort, as if something in the environment is off, something is trying to reach through the static. The man's voice quivers slightly as he continues. I didn't move. I couldn't. I was frozen. It's like it had me in its grip, even from a distance. I thought I'd be able to move, to run, but I just couldn't. I watched it, and it just stood there, like it was waiting, watching me, but not like any person could. As he speaks, the camera angle changes. It lingers on his hands, clenched tightly together in his lap. The tension in his body is palpable, And even though his words paint a picture of a terrifying encounter, it's the way his body reacts that seems to convey the full weight of his experience. His eyes dart nervously to the side, avoiding the camera's gaze as though he's still looking for something lurking just out of sight. The sound around him continues to warp and shift, the low hum now mingling with a distant wind, carrying with it an almost unsettling rhythmic sound. Is it the wind? Or something else? The gentle rustling of the air outside is filled with an eerie timbre, as though the wind itself is whispering secrets it shouldn't know. Suddenly, the camera shifts back to his face, focusing on the sweat now streaming down his cheek. His breath comes in short, shallow bursts. The room, although dimly lit, seems colder, the shadows in the corners deepening and growing darker as he speaks. His body language suggests that whatever he saw is not something he can easily shake off. It wasn't just the eyes, he says, his voice trembling more now. There was something wrong about its shape, its form. I couldn't make out details. It was almost like a shadow, but it was too solid for that. It was like the thing wasn't supposed to be there at all, but it was. And it was waiting, watching. It wasn't human, I swear to God. As the witness recounts his experience, the camera slowly zooms out, shifting focus away from the man and toward the corner of the room behind him. The lighting flickers, and the shadows in the room begin to stretch longer, darker. The ambiance grows increasingly unnerving, as if the room itself is closing in on him. The sound begins to distort further. The wind picks up outside, now joined by a series of faint, almost inaudible scratching noises. The camera lingers in the shadows of the room, capturing the subtle, unsettling sound of something tapping faintly against the wall, impossibly soft yet hauntingly deliberate. Is it just the wind, or is it something else? I don't know what it was, but I know it was watching me. I wasn't just afraid of it. I knew it wasn't there to hurt me. It was there to make me look, to make me see, the man continues, his voice cracking. And then, just like that, it disappeared. Gone. As the man's words linger in the air, the screen begins to distort further, flickering, the sound becoming sharper and more intrusive. The camera shifts focus back to the man's terrified eyes, his chest rising and falling with uneven breaths. His face looks more pained now, as though recalling this event brings him physical discomfort. The camera holds on his face, but now the room around him has become dark, so dark that the shadows seem to move on their own. The low hum of interference begins to surge, growing louder, threatening to overpower the man's shaky words. "I've never seen anything like that before," he whispers, almost to himself. "And I never want to again." The camera lingers for a moment longer on his face before pulling back. The image begins to blur as the low buzzing sound becomes almost deafening, disorienting. The screen flickers one last time before transitioning into static, and then, with one final sharp snap of noise, it cuts to black. The screen flickers again. The image distorts with brief static, and the sound briefly cuts out, making the transition feel even more jarring. There's a shift in the tone now. This is no longer the comforting quiet of the town. The camera pulls away from the reporter, moving steadily through the static, until it settles on an entirely new setting. A dense, quiet forest, shrouded in an eerie, fog-like mist. The light is weak, as though the sun is struggling to break through the thick canopy of trees above. The camera captures the towering trees, their limbs twisting like ancient skeletons, tangled in the weight of years. The air feels dense and stagnant. The atmosphere is oppressive, as if the very space around the camera is closing in. The sound of leaves rustling in the faint wind is the only thing that fills the silence, but even that sounds wrong. Too soft, almost too deliberate. The reporter's voice cuts through the atmosphere, his words now carrying a sense of urgency, as if he too feels the heavy air of dread creeping in. His tone is steady, but there's an edge of something, an unspoken fear. Residents in the area have reported a growing number of strange occurrences during the late hours of the night. It's not just the vague shadows they've seen, but also strange sounds, unexplainable noises that seem to come from all directions. These sounds, they're getting closer, more intense, and we can sense it too. Something is waiting, something we cannot explain. The words echo slightly, and the air in the forest seems to hum with the weight of the reporter's statement. There is a tension now, a quiet building of dread that runs through the words, drawing the viewer deeper into the unknown. The camera zooms slowly through the dense trees, the mist growing thicker, obscuring the path ahead. It's difficult to discern where the trees end and the fog begins. The light filtering through the branches is so faint it barely touches the forest floor. Shadows stretch unnaturally long in this dim world, moving in ways that don't seem to make sense. A sense of being watched lingers, but there is no clear source. The silence of the forest is almost unbearable. Only the occasional creak of a branch or the rustle of leaves can be heard. But then, faintly, just below the ambient noise, there's something more. A soft, almost imperceptible thudding. It's rhythmic, deliberate, and distant at first, but it feels as though it's coming closer. Each thud sends a small ripple through the air, but the sound isn't clear enough to understand. It feels almost like something large, heavy, and unnatural, moving with purpose. As the camera moves deeper into the forest, the feeling intensifies. The fog grows thicker. The trees seem to stretch further, and yet the space becomes smaller. The camera picks up on strange, flickering lights between the trees, just brief flashes, too quick to focus on, too erratic to make sense of. But the lights are there, pulsing in the distance, as if something is moving within the mist, hidden in the shadows. The reporter's voice continues, this time carrying a weight that wasn't there before, the urgency thickening with each word. The sounds have become impossible to ignore. People are hearing them now, on their doorsteps, in their yards, and, in some cases, right outside their windows. Some claim it's a heavy footfall, others say it's more like scratching. Scraping at the walls. Whatever it is, it's moving, and it's getting closer. The camera pans slowly to the side, showing a thick, gnarled tree. The bark on the trunk is torn, jagged, as if something had been clawing at it, ripping, scraping. It's as though whatever is causing these noises isn't just lurking in the forest, but is actively engaged with the environment, leaving its mark on the very space it inhabits. The camera continues its slow progression through the forest. But now, there's something about the movement of the trees, the way they shift and sway, that feels wrong. It's not a natural movement. It's almost as if the trees themselves are being forced to bend, pushed by an unseen presence, an invisible force creeping through the forest. A distant thud echoes again, this time louder, closer, the sound of something heavy dragging itself across the ground. It's unmistakable now. The noise isn't just a casual scrape or a rustle. It's a deliberate, calculated motion. It feels like something or someone is approaching, and whatever it is, it's making its presence known. The screen flickers again, and for a split second, the image goes dark, before returning to the eerie image of the forest, now deeper in the fog. The camera shifts upwards, showing the canopy above, but the shadows between the branches are no longer just shadows. They seem to move, contorting and shifting in unnatural ways, as if they are not bound by the usual rules of light and dark. Then, almost imperceptibly, the camera catches something. A flash, a brief, unnerving image of a figure standing between the trees. The figure is too distant to make out clearly, but it's not the same as the trees. It's darker, taller, its outline is sharp, distorted, as though it's not meant to exist in this place at all. The figure doesn't move, at least not at first. It simply stands there, a silhouette in the mist. The thudding grows louder, more frantic. The lights flicker again in the distance. The camera captures the briefest movement of the figure, a slow, deliberate turn of its head, as though it's aware of the camera, aware of the presence watching from the darkness. The forest seems to close in around the camera, the air thick with a growing sense of dread. The leaves stir in the wind, but now the wind itself seems wrong. It's colder, more oppressive, and then, in the blink of an eye, the figure is gone. The camera lingers on the spot where the figure was standing, and for a moment, There's nothing but the fog, the mist, and the ever-present thudding sound that now fills the entire space. The camera begins to pull back slowly until it reaches the edge of the forest where the trees stop, and the mist begins to dissipate, leaving only an empty, silent clearing. The reporter's voice cuts back in, this time softer, almost whispering, as though the enormity of what has been seen is weighing him down. We don't know what these figures are, or what they want, but we can feel it. Something is moving through the woods, and it's not stopping. As the last word is spoken, the screen fades to black, the soft hum of static filling the silence. The scene begins with the screen flickering once more, transitioning from the eerie silence of the forest to the dimly lit interior of another room. This time, the camera focuses on a second witness, a man who is seated in front of the camera. His face is deliberately blurred out, but his body language speaks volumes. His shoulders are tense, his hands trembling slightly in his lap. Beads of sweat dot his forehead, and his eyes dart nervously, as if still haunted by whatever he witnessed. The air around him feels thick with unease, as if the walls themselves are closing in. The low hum of static continues in the background, adding an extra layer of discomfort. The room is poorly lit, with only a small light illuminating the witness's face, casting deep shadows that accentuate the panic in his expression. He glances over his shoulder, as if expecting something to be lurking just out of sight. His breath comes in shallow, uneven bursts as he prepares to speak. "I was inside my house," he begins, his voice shaking slightly. "And then, all of a sudden, I saw it. I saw that thing, standing just outside my window." The witness pauses for a moment, his body stiffening as the memory takes hold of him. The camera lingers on his face, capturing the raw terror in his eyes. He swallows hard, as if trying to keep himself together before continuing. "It was standing right there, under the tree. I don't know how long it had been there, but when I saw it, I froze. I couldn't move. It was just staring at me. Those eyes, they were so bright. Too bright. I couldn't even say they were eyes. They were like burning lights or something. I've never seen anything like it before, and it wasn't human." The camera zooms in slightly on the witness's face, highlighting the fear that is now palpable in his voice. The tremble in his words, the way his eyes keep darting to the shadows in the corners of the room, all speak to the depth of his fear. It wasn't a person. It was something else. Something I couldn't explain, he continues, his voice growing softer, almost to a whisper. I don't know how, but I just knew. I knew it wasn't human, and the way it just stood there, motionless, watching me, He cuts himself off, his breathing growing more erratic. The camera slowly pulls back, as if to give him space, but the tension in the room only grows stronger. The slight static crackle in the background intensifies, as though the very atmosphere is thickening, closing in on him. The scene transitions to outside the witness's home, the camera slowly zooming in on a dark and shadowy garden. The mist from earlier has started to creep back in, covering the ground like a heavy blanket. The night has settled in fully now, and the garden is bathed in darkness, save for a few faint flickering lights from the nearby street lamps. The camera lingers on the tree the witness mentioned, its silhouette rising out of the darkness, its branches twisting like gnarled fingers reaching toward the sky. There is an unnatural stillness to the scene, as if the wind itself has decided to hold its breath. A few scattered beams of light from the street barely illuminate the garden, casting long, jagged shadows that seem to move of their own accord. As the camera focuses on the tree, a shadow slowly begins to form beneath it, a dark, indistinct figure. It's hard to make out any details at first, just a mass of darkness blending into the surrounding shadows. But then, for a brief moment, a pair of faint, glimmering lights appear. They shine briefly, almost like eyes, before vanishing again into the thick shadows. The figure remains still, unmoving, watching. The witness's voice cuts back into the scene, his words overlapping with the visuals, almost as if they're being spoken from the same space. It just stood there, like it was waiting for me to do something, or maybe for me to see it. I could feel it, feel it in my bones. It wasn't just watching, it was waiting for something. The camera shifts slightly, now catching the faintest movement, something in the darkness flitting in and out of view. The figure's outline shifts, subtly, as though it's adjusting itself, or perhaps it's simply the distortion of light and shadow playing tricks. But the sensation of being watched, of being trapped in the gaze of something far beyond human, is overwhelming. The camera pulls back to show the full scope of the garden, but the darkness seems to press in closer now, as if the space itself is shrinking. The figure remains motionless, its presence growing more ominous with every passing second. The air feels heavier, the static crackling in the background intensifying, as though it's a warning, a signal that whatever is lurking in the shadows is not just an observer, but a predator. The witness's voice returns, this time almost frantic, his words tumbling over one another. I didn't dare move. I stayed frozen in place, and then it moved. I couldn't see how, but it wasn't where it was anymore. It just vanished. The camera cuts back to his face, his eyes wide with fear. He looks exhausted, as though the mere act of recounting the event is wearing him down. The room around him seems to grow darker, the shadows lengthening, closing in on him. The sound of his voice, once shaky, now becomes more desperate. I don't know where it went, but I know it wasn't human. I know it was something other. The camera once again transitions back to the garden. The figure is no longer visible, but the sense of unease lingers in the air, heavy and oppressive. The lights from the street lamps flicker again, casting eerie patterns on the ground, as if something is shifting just beyond their reach. For a long moment, there's nothing but silence, the only sound being the faint rustling of the trees in the breeze. But the tension is palpable, unspoken, but undeniably present. Something is still out there, something that's not supposed to be. The witness's final words, spoken with quiet urgency, drift back in, almost drowned by the static. I don't know if it's still out there, but I know it's waiting, watching, and I'm not safe. The camera zooms out slowly, leaving the witness behind in the dimly lit room, his figure growing smaller and more distant in the frame. The scene lingers for a moment longer on the darkened garden, the shadows now seeming to move on their own, before cutting abruptly to black. The screen flickers again, distorting with the usual interference before cutting to a grainy black and white clip. The image is rough, distorted, and shaky, but it's clear enough to see it's from a security camera placed inside a house. The low hum of static fills the background, making the already unsettling footage feel even more distant and disconnected. The camera's perspective is set in the corner of a dimly lit hallway. The shadows stretch long across the floor, and the faint glow of a hallway light creates an eerie, unwelcoming atmosphere. The house is quiet, almost too quiet as the footage plays in slow motion. The screen's grainy quality adds an air of uncertainty. Something is off, but it's hard to pinpoint exactly what. The footage remains still for several moments. The faint sound of creaking floorboards can be heard, but there's no movement, only the occasional flicker of the light above, which seems to stutter intermittently. The camera seems locked in place, capturing only the hallway and the soft, dim illumination that stretches across the floor. Then, without warning, the frame is interrupted by something that causes a cold shiver to run through the viewer. A figure, a shadow, indistinct and barely visible, moves swiftly across the frame. It's too quick, too blurry to make out any features clearly. The shape seems to glide rather than walk, moving so fast that it almost looks like a smudge or an anomaly in the footage. The figure appears for just a split second, disappearing into the darkness beyond the camera's view. There's no sound, no footsteps, just the faintest whisper of movement. The screen cuts back to the reporter's face, his expression tense, his voice steady but clearly strained. We've just received this security footage from a house connected to one of the recent disappearances. While the image quality is somewhat poor, there's something unsettling about it. We can clearly make out a figure, possibly a person, though it's difficult to say for sure, that moves quickly across the frame. The camera zooms in slightly, focusing on his face. His brow is furrowed, and the subtle anxiety in his voice suggests that he, too, is grappling with the implications of what they've just shown. His eyes shift momentarily to the side, as if trying to make sense of the footage himself, but he quickly looks back to the camera, steeling himself for the next part of the broadcast. "We can't make out much detail, but it doesn't look like anything a person should be able to do," the reporter continues. "The movement is unnatural, far too fast, and it's hard to say if it's even human." The camera cuts back to the security footage, this time slowed down even further to capture every detail. The hallway is dimmer now, with shadows clinging to the edges of the frame. The faint glow from the hallway light flickers once more, casting an unsettling, jerky rhythm to the scene. The shadow figure appears again, but this time, the camera lingers on its brief movement. It appears from the right side of the frame, moving at an inhuman speed. There's a distinct whoosh sound, quick like air being displaced, just as the figure passes through the hallway. It doesn't touch the ground the way a person would. It seems to glide, more like a blur than a solid entity. For a moment, the camera captures something almost imperceptible, a shift in the air, a faint distortion that follows the figure, like the world around it is bending in response. The camera freezes on this frame for a few seconds, emphasizing the oddness of the moment. Then, just as quickly as it appears, the shadow vanishes into the dark, disappearing behind a corner. The hallway is empty once again, the eerie quiet hanging heavy in the air. The camera cuts back to the screen full of static as the footage loops back, but this time, the sound of something scratching, faint but present, can be heard, adding a layer of unease to the silence. The camera cuts back to the reporter, now in a different location. The room is darker than before, the light casting long, distorted shadows across his face. He looks deeply unsettled as he addresses the audience. This footage was taken in the early hours of the morning, and though the video quality doesn't offer much clarity, we can see a figure moving across the screen, he repeats, his voice tinged with disbelief. But here's the thing. The movement isn't natural. It doesn't make sense. Whatever it is, it's fast, it's erratic, and it doesn't belong in the real world. He pauses for a moment, letting the weight of his words settle. It's not just a shadow. It's not just a trick of the light. This is something other, and it's been seen again in multiple locations. The camera cuts back to the footage, this time focusing on the doorway at the end of the hallway. The shadow figure appears once again, its form more distinct this time, but still just a blur of darkness. The speed of its movement is almost too fast to comprehend. It slides across the frame, and in that brief moment, its outline shifts, a strange, distorted shape, almost inhuman, as if it doesn't quite belong in the physical world. It seems like it's pulling the air around it, bending reality just by being present. For a moment, there's a strange sensation of vertigo, like the camera itself is trying to hold onto the footage but is unable to. The figure disappears once again, but the aftertaste of its presence lingers on the screen, a dark stain in the corner of the frame. The footage ends abruptly, cutting to black. The screen shudders again, but this time the static is more pronounced, flickering like a broken signal trying desperately to hold on. The image distorts, shifting between brief moments of clarity and the disorienting blur of interference. The familiar, unsettling hum of static fills the background, but now it's joined by something more unnerving, a series of scratching noises. At first, it's subtle, almost unnoticeable, but as it continues, it becomes impossible to ignore. The camera cuts to the reporter, his face still illuminated by the dim light of the studio. His expression is stern, but there's an unmistakable edge of discomfort in his eyes as he speaks. The tension in the air is palpable, and it's clear that he, too, feels the weight of the strange events that have been unfolding. "We've received a significant number of calls in the last few days," the reporter says, his voice steady but carrying an undercurrent of growing unease. "From people saying they've heard strange noises, knocking, the sound of footsteps on hardwood floors. But these noises, they don't seem to have any clear source. It's like they're coming from another space entirely, echoing through the walls." As he speaks, the camera subtly shifts, moving away from the reporter and into a deeper space, focusing on an empty hallway, dimly lit by a flickering light above. The shadows stretch unnaturally long, swallowing up the edges of the frame. The quiet, oppressive silence of the space is unsettling, and the flicker of the light only intensifies the unease. It feels like something is about to happen, but no one can predict when. The scratching noise continues, growing louder and more distinct now, its rhythm erratic yet deliberate. The sound is unmistakable, something scraping across the surface of wood. It's joined by another sound, a sharp knock, almost too loud for the room's silence. The camera slowly zooms in on the hallway, focusing on the space beneath the door at the end. For a moment, it looks perfectly still, the silence hanging heavily in the air. And then, another knock. Knock, louder this time. The sound echoes off the walls, vibrating through the space. Each knock comes with a strange resonance, as though it's not merely a physical sound, but something deeper, reverberating through the very fabric of the house. The knocking grows louder with each passing second, the rhythm steady and unnervingly deliberate. It feels like it's closing in on the camera, getting closer with every beat. The camera shakes slightly, the frame trembling as if an invisible force is subtly shaking the room. It's as if the sound itself is affecting the environment. The vibrations can almost be felt through the screen, causing the walls to pulse and the shadows to flicker in time with the rhythm of the knocks. There's no visible source for the sound, no movement, just the oppressive weight of something unseen. The tension is building rapidly, and with each knock the camera becomes more unstable, like it's being pulled in multiple directions by the increasing force of the noise. The camera zooms in on a closed door at the end of the hallway, the faintest trace of light seeping out from underneath it. The knocking continues, but now another sound joins in, a faint scraping noise, like nails dragging slowly down a chalkboard. It's almost too high-pitched, too sharp to ignore. The sound seems to reverberate in the very core of the viewer's chest, making the heart race. The scratching follows the rhythm of the knocks, sometimes matching them in pace, other times skipping a beat like it's coming from a different space altogether. For a moment, everything stops. The knocking ceases. The scratching fades away. The silence that follows is suffocating, almost unbearable. The tension in the room is so thick that it feels as though the air itself is holding its breath. And then, the sounds return. Closer now. Knock, knock, scrape. Each sound more distinct, more forceful, and this time, it's not just coming from the hallway. It's coming from everywhere. The walls, the ceiling, the floor. The noise feels omnipresent, like it's echoing through the very fabric of the house, bending and distorting reality itself. The camera shakes violently now, the frame warping as though something is trying to break free from the confines of the house. The sound crescendos to an almost unbearable pitch, and for a split second, it feels like the noise itself is alive, an entity in its own right, pushing against the walls of the room. The camera zooms in quickly on the space beneath the door, but there's nothing. Just darkness. The knocking, the scraping, the disturbing noises, all of it is coming from nowhere and everywhere. The reporter's voice returns, but now it's tinged with an edge of palpable concern. His eyes flick to the side, the unease evident in his expression as he speaks again, the words flowing quicker, almost in a rush. "We've spoken to multiple people who've heard these noises," he says, his tone more urgent now, "and each one says the same thing. It's as if the sounds are coming from the walls themselves, from the very structure of the house. These are not ordinary noises. There's something that doesn't belong." The camera pulls back, moving away from the door in the hallway, but the shadows in the space behind it seem to stretch further now, darker and more oppressive. The sounds continue to echo in the background, louder now, surrounding the viewer from all directions. The camera shakes again, this time more violently, and the image on the screen blurs as though something unseen is trying to break through the reality of the moment. The knocking doesn't stop. The scraping doesn't stop. They continue to build, relentless in their pursuit of something unseen, something just beyond the reach of the camera. With every knock, with every scrape, the tension in the room grows unbearable. For a brief moment, the static begins to overpower the audio, a jarring, screeching sound that drowns out the knocks. The camera flickers wildly, the image distorting beyond recognition before finally cutting to black. The scene begins with the familiar image of the reporter in the studio, but this time, his calm professionalism is cracked. His eyes dart nervously from the teleprompter to the camera, and his posture is less composed, more tense. His fingers twitch at his side, and his breath is noticeably shallow, as though he is struggling to maintain control over the mounting fear. The unsettling static continues in the background, growing louder, mixing with a low hum that suggests something beyond the normal interference. The camera slowly zooms in on his face, catching the subtle tremor of his lips as he prepares to speak. His voice comes out strained, as though the words are fighting to be released. We will continue to monitor this situation and provide you with the latest information as soon as we receive it. He begins, his tone tight. But before we close tonight's broadcast, I want to warn all of you. If you see anything unusual, anything, don't ignore it. His voice falters for a moment, the words choking in his throat. The camera captures this hesitation, a brief, almost imperceptible shift in his demeanor before he quickly tries to regain his composure. We cannot explain these events, but they are happening, and we need to stay vigilant. The camera shakes suddenly, as though something heavy is pressing down on the set. A loud crackling sound fills the room, and the picture on the screen distorts, warping the reporter's face into strange, jagged shapes. The once stable image now flickers violently, distorting like a malfunctioning TV set, each frame breaking up into fragments of static and white noise. The hum of interference grows louder, escalating into a high-pitched whine that drowns out the reporter's voice. It becomes harder to make out his words as they become increasingly muffled, consumed by the chaos of the transmission. The lights in the studio flicker. At first, it's just a subtle blink, barely noticeable, but as the seconds pass, the flickering intensifies. The lights above the reporter begin to stutter violently, casting long, sharp shadows across his face. The room grows colder, the unnatural staccato of the lights making the atmosphere feel more oppressive with each passing second. The camera wavers again, this time more violently. It seems as if something is physically affecting the broadcast, a presence beyond the frame pushing against the screen. The reporter's voice becomes more distant, his words barely audible over the rising crackle of static. I don't know what's happening, he says, his voice cracking with panic. But you need to be careful. If you hear those sounds, if you see something move, don't approach it. Please, stay safe. His words seem to hang in the air, but they are swallowed up by the increasing interference. The camera jerks once more, and then the light flickers out entirely. The studio is now plunged into darkness. The only sound is the eerie hum of the broken broadcast. The faint, distorted image of the reporter's silhouette remains on screen for a moment longer, his figure barely visible in the dim light of the studio. Then, the image begins to break apart further. The static is overwhelming now, filling the screen with a chaotic mess of black and white streaks. The low whine of the audio bleeds into the silence, drowning out everything. The words of the reporter are lost to the distortion. Suddenly, the image jolts, the screen splitting into fragmented bits of static and light. The sound cuts out entirely, leaving nothing but the overwhelming, oppressive silence that follows the loss of signal. The last trace of the reporter's voice vanishes, replaced by the low, constant hum of interference. For a few moments, the screen remains completely black. The tension is unbearable. There's no explanation, no warning, just an empty void. Then, in an instant, the screen cuts to complete blackness, the sound still crackling in the background. It's as though the very signal itself has been torn away, leaving only the silence behind. The screen goes entirely black, a void that swallows everything, leaving nothing but silence in its wake. For a few long seconds, there is no sound. The once distorted broadcast is completely gone, leaving only a haunting emptiness. The image has faded, and the connection has been severed. There are no more flickers of light, no more words from the reporter, just the heavy silence that lingers like a dark cloud. Then, almost imperceptibly, a soft tee noise begins, echoing through the speakers. It's faint at first, a barely audible tone that seems to reverberate in the dark. The noise is mechanical, almost too regular, but it's the kind of noise that suggests something is still there, still trying to reach through the static, despite everything. The TT sound grows louder, each pulse a reminder of the broadcast that just ended, but it doesn't stop. It persists like an unresolved signal, a remnant of something left incomplete. It's rhythmic but unnerving, as though it's coming from somewhere far off, maybe from the void itself. The sound feels almost like a faint heartbeat, but it's cold, mechanical, a chilling reminder that something is still attempting to be heard, even after everything has gone silent. The camera lingers on the screen, now completely dark, as the sound continues to grow louder and more insistent. It's a soft beep, like a signal that has been interrupted, lingering at the edge of what can be understood. The static buzz fills the empty room, louder now, almost as though the television set is struggling against something trying to break through. The sound of the TT increases in frequency, but it is still strange, unsettling, out of place in the silence. It seems to signal an incomplete message, something trying to reach the other side but never quite getting there. A brief flash of light flickers on the screen for a split second, then fades. It's a fleeting moment of something alive, something almost human in its attempt to communicate. But the moment is gone as quickly as it came, leaving nothing behind but more silence. The screen remains pitch black, the TTT sound continuing, but now more haunting, lingering in the air. For the next few seconds, the silence deepens. The beep continues, but it seems far away now, almost like the connection is slipping further out of reach. The TTT becomes distant, fading with every second, like the last echo of something lost in time. Then, abruptly, the sound stops. The final TT fades into nothingness. There's no sound, no image, no signal, just blackness, utter and complete. The absence of everything is more powerful than any of the static or distortion that preceded it. The television screen, once full of life and chaos, now holds only a stark emptiness. The screen stays black for a few more moments, the quiet, almost, suffocating in its finality. It's as if the world itself has paused, the unsettling sensation that whatever was happening has come to a grim halt, leaving behind only the void. Finally, the credits begin to roll, slowly, but they are silent. No music, no sound, just blackness and the fading memory of a transmission cut too soon. The last image, the last words, and the last sound all gone, leaving only questions unanswered.